Yes, sir, I can.
Great, fantastic. All right, then we'll get going. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. William E. Hamilton Jr., also known as Dr. Bill 360. Thank you for joining me for this special moment, the launch of my new book, Navigating Intercultural Competence, Fostering Global Citizenship in Education and Leadership. Wherever you are, wherever you're joining from, whether live or on the replay, I'm grateful you're here. So we may be separated by distance, but we're connected by something deeper, I hope, a desire to lead with clarity, courage, and cultural awareness. You know, a famous mystic once said, your purpose is right in front of you. Well, mine is this work, and today I want to share with you the why behind this book, why it matters, why now, and why you might be exactly who it's for. So, if you wouldn't mind, though, maybe you can drop where you're from or what's going on in the chat. Say hello, where you're checking in from. So, here's the standard executive summary of the book, what one might expect. But stay with me. I promise after this, I will have something exciting, an exciting storytelling, and some poems you will enjoy. So, the executive summary for this book, Navigating Intercultural Competence, Fostering Global Citizenship in Education and Leadership, addresses the growing need for actionable strategies to build intercultural competence and promote global citizenship. So, this book tackles key issues such as cultural bias in education, ineffective diversity efforts in organizations, resistance to cultural change, and the what I'd call underuse of technology in global learning. So, by offering structured frameworks, real world examples, and assessment tools like Bloom's Taxonomy and the Intercultural Development Inventory, the book equips educators, leaders, and practitioners, right, to foster inclusive environments, measure growth, and prepare for future global challenges. Now, taxonomy is nothing more than a system for organizing or categorizing things. For example, the taxonomy of animals and plants. In this context, the context of learning, it refers to a structured way to classify different levels of understanding or skills, such as basic knowledge, deeper analysis, or creative problem solving. It helps educators and those creating content to have clear goals and measure progress. So, specifically, the book solves the problem of one, concerns about cultural competence in education and leadership, two, barriers to global citizenship, three, educational inequalities and cultural bias, four, challenges in corporate diversity and inclusion, five, resistance to cultural change, six, underutilization of technology in intercultural learning, seven, the need for measurable outcomes in intercultural programs, and eight, preparation for future global challenges. Okay, now, so that's the technical side of what this book is. Now, for a more human and heart side. So, we're not born culturally competent. To some extent, we choose it over and over. Cultural awareness. It's not just a virtue, not just a value, it's a decision, a choice, a mindset. And in a world that feels increasingly divided by assumptions, headlines, and silent misunderstandings, this book, is my flame, as I call it. Cultural awareness is a choice. This is my signal, the flame, that you can lead better, live better, and listen harder. This isn't just a launch, it's a mindset launch. Okay, so I'd like to continue now with something small but I think powerful, a story about an imaginary city. So what I'm getting at now is I read the technical definition of what this book is about, and now I'm going for the feeling, heart, and value of it, saying it another way, using a human touch. It's a story of an imaginary city inspired by this book, a story created by me just for this presentation, then a Japanese haiku created for this presentation that captures the heartbeat of this journey. And for those who may not know, a haiku is a structured Japanese poem of 3 lines. The first line has 5 syllables, the second 7, and the third 5. It hopes to capture a powerful image, insight, contrast, and reflection. In this case, leadership, intercultural growth, and education. That's what I'm shooting for. And then a poem I also created for this presentation. So like I said, I gave you the technical side, and this is my storytelling of what that is. So these stories could be every school, every boardroom, every relationship that chooses to grow across differences for a more complex cultural world view. And I hope you enjoy it. Again, this storytelling version of the academic executive's summary that I read earlier, but again said with feeling, value, and heart. The Bridge Builders of Solana, a short story inspired by the book Navigating Intercultural Competence, Fostering Global Citizenship in Education and Leadership. Once upon a not too distant future, in a bustling city called Solana, derived from Latin and Spanish for sunlight, it hints a warmth, clarity, and enlightenment. There lived a group of professionals from all walks of life, teachers, leaders, students, and business people. Though diverse in appearance, language, and upbringing, they were all stuck, separated by invisible walls of misunderstanding, stereotypes, and silence. In Solana, people often talked at each other, but rarely with each other. Classrooms favored one culture, boardrooms ignored others, and efforts to unite were well-meaning but scattered. Global citizenship was a poster on the wall, not a practice in daily life. No one really knew how to turn empathy into action or inclusion into strategy. One day, a traveler arrived carrying a worn satchel labeled Frameworks, Tools, and Hope. This traveler wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. They were more like a guide, someone who walked many paths, studied many maps, and learned the language of both hearts and systems. Instead, inside the satchel were powerful artifacts, a compass that pointed toward global citizenship, not just nationality, a blueprint for building inclusive classrooms, culturally responsive workplaces, and digitally connected communities. A mirror that didn't just reflect, but revealed biases, assumptions, and untapped potential. A lens, much like this one, to see English not as a wall, but as a bridge to multiple worlds. The traveler gathered a circle of curious minds. Dr. Peterson, the EFL teacher, English as a foreign language teacher, who reimagined classrooms across continents. Administrator Michael, who turned training into transformation. Alex Johnson, who proved that digital tools could be more than just inboxes. Mr. Anand, who showed how accents are not flaws, but flags of identity. Ms. Rutgers, who rebuilt curriculum like it was a mosaic. Dr. Singh, who rehumanized healthcare through empathy and structure. Together, they began building bridges, not with concrete, but with culture, curiosity, and competence. These bridges didn't just connect schools to communities or companies to continents. They connected minds to meaning, policies to purpose, diversity to development. Over time, the invisible walls crumbled, not by force, but by shared stories, measurable growth, and radical reflection. And when people ask, what changed Solana? The answer echoed back. They read the map. They chose to build. Haiku, Solana's Bridge. Solana City, where silence learns to listen. Bridges bloom through minds. Poem, The Compass We Forgot. They built walls without meaning, rules without rhythm, and called it order. But in Solana, someone remembered the compass. Not the one pointing north, but the one that points inward, toward story, toward voice, toward the other. Teachers laid bricks of dialogue. Leaders peeled away silence. Students rewrote the maps with empathy inked between every dotted line. And when they spoke, it wasn't in one language, but in many forms of understanding, because they knew you don't cross cultures by chance. You cross them by choice. Again, I reference my flame here. Cultural awareness is a choice. So what changed in Solana? Maybe we can have some chat comments. What do you think changed in Solana? Maybe change. Okay, they read the map. They chose to build. That's the same invitation this book makes to you. To stop waiting for belonging to appear and to start building it. To wear your why, as I call it. Your flame. You draw people in. To stop waiting, again, to start building, to wear your why, through reflection, empathy, and leadership. Okay, so let's see. Now we're going to talk about defining the work of cultural awareness versus intercultural competence. Stay with me. Let's ground this, because I get asked all the time, what's the difference between cultural awareness and intercultural competence? Cultural awareness and intercultural competence, all the time. So cultural awareness is knowing that your lens isn't the only lens. Intercultural competence, that's what you do with that knowledge. It's awareness plus adaptation, action. It's reflection plus strategic practice. In the book, I break it down across 3 domains. What you know, the cognitive, how you feel, the affective, and what you do, the psychomotor, right? And I give you the tools. These are a reference to Bloom's Taxonomy, to real-world examples and rubrics to move from theory to transformation. So again, what problems does this book solve? I mentioned those earlier, but this isn't just a book of ideals. It's a response to real challenges I've seen around the world. Let me check, make sure we good in the chat. Yeah. So here's what the book addresses. The gap in cultural understanding in education and leadership, the abstractness of global citizenship, inequality and cultural bias in curriculum and hiring, DEI programs that don't stick, resistance to change, underused tech in cultural learning, lack of measurable outcomes in intercultural programs, and the biggest one, I think, a lack of preparation for future global complexity. If you've ever thought this training isn't enough, this team isn't clicking, or why do my students or colleagues still feel unseen? This book is your map. So let's go back to the compass and the poem. Remember that? The compass we forgot? They built walls without meaning, rules without rhythm, and called it order. You don't cross cultures by chance. You cross them by chance, by choice. You cross them by choice. So that's what this book is: a compass, a guide, a decision, a choice. All right. Maybe we can hear from you. Yeah, we need the compass, the guide. So it's not a lecture. And this is why I say we need more people to wear your why. You know, like a beacon, a flame. Right? You heard me mention the flame. This symbol I put on shirts, hats, and other merch. It's more than a logo. It's a declaration. When you wear your why, you're saying, I choose to show up. I choose awareness. I choose to be seen leading differently. And that matters because cultural competence starts not just with policy, but with presence. You can find the merch at the portal.ciwlearning.com, portal.ciwlearning.com, and go through the menu items. You can see the author's page and also the shop, or you can go directly there at drbill360.net/shop. So each item carries a message. Here's some example of that. Wear your why. Some nice hats, many different colors. Wear your why, and then also culture awareness is a choice. So here's what the back of that one looks like. It's a nice one. We also have book bags there. Global Citizenship is a choice. Carry the conversation, right? In black and white. Also have coffee tumblers of many different colors. Black, purple, red, many different colors. You go there, you see. And also cups, right? Cups with the different, let's say the front facing the book. There are two different types. And also have cultural empathy on the sides. So they come black and white, or white with many different colors inside. And also Parkers of many different colors. So this one's pink, they have red, and blue, white, black, many colors there. Also shirts and these types of things. Again, so each item carries a message, a mindset, and a mission. Okay, let's get back to some technical stuff. I veered off into the human side of it, but the book as a roadmap. Let's get back to some technical stuff. Now, let's walk through the table of contents. You can see here, this is the actual table of contents. You can also go here, or you can go through the portal to the author's page. And when you get to the author's page, you scroll down to the Amazon books. And if you click on the hardcover one, it'll take you to the Amazon page and you'll see read sample. So you'll see all the front matter of the book and a lot of chapter 1. You can also use this QR code, the Amazon book link. It'll take you right to that Amazon hardcover book. If you're on a mobile device, more than likely you won't see that read sample copy. Okay, so at this point, any questions? Any questions? Questions? No? Okay, well, I'll keep going then. Let me put up the table of contents here. So, the importance of intercultural competence in a globalized world. So, in chapter 1, in summary, kind of what you can expect. So, the book highlights how resistance to cultural change often manifests in English language education, where traditional curricula prioritizes Western-centric perspectives. For example, educators and policymakers may focus exclusively on teaching English through the lens of Western cultural norms, neglecting the rich diversity of global English-speaking communities. So this approach reinforces the dominance of Western culture and marginalizes the contributions of non-Western societies to the global English-speaking landscape. So the book suggests that this resistance stems from a lack of awareness. Or maybe they have awareness but not competence. Competence implies action. And an unwillingness to challenge the status quo. To address this, the book advocates integrating intercultural competence into language education by incorporating diverse cultural narratives, emphasizing the global variations of English and promoting plurilingualism. By doing so, educators can foster a more inclusive learning environment that values cultural diversity and prepares students to navigate the complexities of a globalized world. Now, I may come back to this later after I brief the other chapters, because some people might be saying, well, what does English have to do with it? Well, most of your other subjects, right, math, science, or whatever it may be, you're using English. Okay? And what you learn when you were taught English, if it's not injected with cultural awareness and intercultural competence, goes over into those other subjects. I have more on that later. So chapter 2 is the evolution and impact of English as a universal language. You may also hear English as a global lingua franca, right? So it explores the role of English as a global lingua franca and its dual nature as both a bridge and a barrier to intercultural communication. Readers gain insights into how English facilitates global connections across diverse cultural contexts, enabling collaboration in business, education, and diplomacy, right? So like I said, we're using English for other purposes. However, the chapter also critically examines the risk of linguistic imperialism, as it's called, and cultural homogenization, emphasizing the need for intercultural competence to navigate power dynamics and promote inclusivity. So it's not enough to be just culturally aware. Intercultural competence implies movement, action, adaptation, behaviors. So chapter 2 also highlights the importance of using English not as a tool for dominance, but as a means to celebrate and amplify cultural diversity, fostering mutual understanding and respect. Let me go ahead and check and see if there are any comments. Okay, so chapters, let's see. Chapters 3 through 4 talks about, chapter 3 goes into a deep dive into a foundational, what I call foundational framework. And chapter 4, applying the foundational framework around stakeholders. So the foundational framework and how it applies to leaders and educators. And I don't want to get into it too deep, but foundational framework, right? This was my dissertation that happened to survey English as a foreign language teachers in their job and capacity, and pulling different models of cultural awareness and intercultural competence in the classroom at a foundational level, and then applying it. So in chapter 3, the book introduces and explores solutions to the concept of culturally responsive teaching practices as a way to combat inequalities in the classroom. And I have many different personas and guides and examples. For example, Mr. Phil Lawrence, a British English as a foreign language teacher, adapts his teaching methods to include culturally relevant materials for his diverse group of students. When a South African student, Zara, feels disconnected from the curriculum that focused solely on British literature, Mr. Lawrence incorporates South African authors, historical narratives into his lessons. So this adjustment not only validates Zara's cultural identity, but also enriches the learning experience of the entire class. By tailoring instruction to reflect the cultural backgrounds of all students, Mr. Lawrence fosters inclusivity and ensures that marginalized perspectives are represented in the curriculum. Now, as I said, move from cultural awareness to intercultural competence. What we're trying to get to is a more complex cultural worldview. So if you were to take an intercultural development inventory assessment, you will be in a category. Now, to move through the different 5 continuums, you would have to do something, right? You'd have to go through some process in order to obtain a more complex cultural view. And this is an example of one from Mr. Lawrence. In chapter 4, chapter 4 explores solutions to integrating diverse perspectives into curriculum design, and also presents Mrs. Rutgers, a curriculum developer who revises an EFL curriculum to include content on cultural awareness and sensitivity. She incorporates case studies of cultural misunderstandings and role-playing exercises that simulate cross-cultural interactions. For instance, one module explores how community residents from different cultural backgrounds navigate access to public services, highlighting disparities and fostering discussions on equity and inclusion. By integrating these real-world scenarios, Mrs. Rutgers ensures that students not only learn English, but also develop the intercultural competence, more complex worldview, right, needed to engage as global citizens. So this example demonstrates how curriculum design can break down barriers to global citizenship by emphasizing cultural understanding alongside language proficiency, right, other than just functional skills and grammar. We will see these kinds of things in something called the CEFR, Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. We'll see this kind of stuff. So these examples from the book illustrate how educators and curriculum developers can address barriers to global citizenship by fostering cultural awareness, challenging stereotypes, and integrating diverse perspectives into educational practices. There is something in here talking about how can these types of views be used in person and in remote spaces, right? Can your map for overcoming challenges be used in both domains? Yes, because what we're really talking about are the practices of the teachers, right? Their teaching practices. And one of the things I had noted in my studies was that first we must be assessed. Before we can actually progress, we need to be assessed. And this could be a problem in certain educational venues. Is it mandatory, that people get an assessment? Is it voluntary? Who knows what our scores were? So this is a problem area. So first of all, we need consensus, right, on what the goals are. So a person may get assessed. Okay, but what do we do with this? So it's not necessarily the venue. However, there are certain things one would have to know online versus in person. Yes, but the principal idea is what are your teaching practices and what are they based on? In your practices, can we see evidence of cultural awareness and intercultural competence, right? So from what I understand, one of the first things we need to do is have an assessment, an intercultural development inventory assessment, see where we are. It's pretty confidential. There's an individual one and then a group one. The individual one is totally private. And then what would happen is you would sit down with the qualified assessor and you would come up with an intercultural development development plan. This plan would include things to help you move towards a more complex cultural worldview. And we would use Bloom's Taxonomy and scaffold our way to a more complex view. But it can be used both online and in person. So these examples, again, are pretty good ones. So chapter 5, let's see. The advanced framework for intercultural competence, chapter 5. And then implementing the advanced framework in multicultural settings. The advanced framework and real multicultural scenarios. So in chapter 5, the book explores how advanced intercultural competence can be applied to tactical global challenges as a tool for global problem solving. For instance, educators are encouraged to integrate project-based learning into their curricula, where students collaborate across cultures to address real-world issues like sustainable development, human rights. By engaging in these projects, students not only develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills, but also learn to appreciate diverse perspectives, right? Ideals that are not yours, and approaches to global challenges. This prepares them to become proactive global citizens who can contribute to solutions that are inclusive and culturally sensitive. But I must emphasize, right? Cultural awareness is a choice. So if that's not your choice, then you may choose not to contribute to inclusivity and cultural sensitive, etc. In chapter 6, the book explores the issue of leadership and intercultural competence initiatives and presents Administrator Michael, as in the administrator of a school or district. Administrator Michael is a school district leader, and there are many examples and persona presented in the book. And they not only present the problem, but they also go through the Bloom Taxonomy and which domains and which levels that they use. But Administrator Michael, a school district leader who spearheads a professional development program for educators, recognizing the gap in intercultural learning, Administrator Michael secures funding to implement workshops, seminars, and mentorship programs focused on the advanced framework of intercultural competence. Again, what is that? We're trying to move towards a more complex cultural worldview. And okay, how? Again, I talked about Bloom scaffolding, and in the Common European Framework of Reference, they suggest domain for content. So for instructional designers, like for me, what that would mean is Where do I pull content from? Personal, public, occupational or professional, and academic. So I would be pulling content from these areas, but I would also scaffold from like remembering to understanding to analysis, etc. Okay. So he also integrates tools like the intercultural, this is Administrator Michael, right? Integrate tools like the Intercultural Development Inventory to assess educators, baseline intercultural competence, and create personalized development plans. I believe this one could be problematic because there could be blowback and etc. But I don't know why people would take it personal because we're trying to move towards some idea. But one of the problems is a lack of consensus on what that looks like. So sometimes we may have a vision or a goal, but it's just a one-line or a two-line sentence. By consensus, people need to get together and have more detail. What does that mean? And we need more people in the room so that this definition by consensus is what people, agree to. Through his leadership, educators across the district embrace intercultural teaching practices, leading to improved student engagement and understanding. So this example illustrates how leaders can drive systematic change by prioritizing intercultural competence in education, empowering both educators and students to thrive in diverse environments. I would love to see some information on that as to how that might happen. I don't know. I just think that part could be problematic if at that level, the administrator level, don't try and drive the IDI assessments. So chapter 7, let's move on. Bridging frameworks with global citizenship. In chapter 7, the book highlights potential solutions to the strategic integration of intercultural competence and organizational leadership. It explores the role of intercultural competence in preparing leaders for future global challenges. Not just the present, but future global challenges. It advocates for the strategic embedding of intercultural competence into organizational development initiatives, ensuring that leaders are equipped to manage diverse teams, navigate cultural complexities, and drive innovation in global markets. For example, the book discusses how organizations can use tools like the Intercultural Development Inventory to assess and enhance their employees' intercultural competence. Again, what are we doing? Trying to drive a more complex cultural worldview. By fostering adaptability and cultural intelligence among leaders, organizations can better respond to global disruptions, such as economic shifts or geopolitical tensions, while maintaining resilience and inclusivity. Check in the chat. Yeah, getting some agreement on the last point. Chapter 8 and 9. So chapter 8 is about global citizenship in practice. Intercultural competence in action. Overcoming challenges. Pathways to effective intercultural competence and global citizenship. Right. So we've moved away from awareness, right, and we're into the competency phase, right? Global citizenship, and we also have concepts along the lines of plural cultural, cosmopolitan, moving, scaffolding up towards a more complex cultural worldview. So in chapter 8, the book discusses the challenges corporations face in implementing diversity and inclusion initiatives at scale. For example, leadership commitment, employee engagement, One example in the book highlights the lack of leadership commitment to intercultural competence programs, which often results in superficial efforts that fail to create meaningful change. The book emphasizes the importance of leaders actively supporting these initiatives, not just as token gestures, but as integral to the organizational strategy. For instance, there's a persona in the book, Alex Johnson, a global trade consultant, designs workshops for multinational corporations to enhance cultural intelligence among employees. However, Alex encounters resistance from leadership teams who view intercultural training as peripheral to business goals. By demonstrating the business impact of cultural intelligence, such as improved negotiation capabilities and stronger global partnerships, Alex successfully secures leadership buy-in, transforming diversity initiatives into strategic priorities. Again, we're pushing the more complex cultural worldview. In chapter 9, amongst other things, the book explores solutions to the problem of underutilizing technology in intercultural competence, right? It highlights the underutilization of technology in fostering intercultural learning, particularly through virtual exchange programs. For instance, many or some schools and organizations fail to leverage platforms like e-twinning or iEarn, these programs. So, in one sense, we're talking about not just e-portfolios, but maybe twinning with other universities, maybe even around the world. So we're logging, we're reflecting, we're engaging in complex projects and problem solving. So, which enables students and educators from different countries to collaborate on projects and share cultural insights, more complex worldview. The book discusses how these programs can bridge geographical divides and provides learners with firsthand intercultural experiences. Yet they're often overlooked due to a lack of awareness and perceived logistical challenges. This is something like Administrator Michael could probably take over for a district, right? To address this issue, the book advocates for integrating virtual exchange programs into curriculum and professional development initiatives. It suggests training educators to use these platforms effectively and providing resources to ensure equitable access, thereby maximizing the potential of technology to enhance intercultural competence. The chapter also touches on structural implementation and behavioral change hindering the effectiveness of diversity and inclusion programs. And I know there's some, I also read there's some of the schools, institutions of higher learning, et cetera, they already have a lot on their plate, a lot of hours and things like that. But again, we're talking working smarter, not harder, right? So if I'm already teaching, let's say, a particular course, all we're really saying is, have you dipped into these different domains? Have you included cultural awareness and intercultural competence things? So you can use examples in content, maybe put a couple of them in there, string them together to come up with a more complex cultural worldview using problem solving. And so no one's asking you to redesign a whole curriculum, come up with some whole new curriculum. So instructional designers and people who use content are aware of that. And we have tools for this, right? We have, again, Bloom's Taxonomy in the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains that can pull this together and scaffold from the lower levels of remembering and understanding up to analysis, creativity, evaluation, and in the affective area, we need to value. So, for example, if I'm learning something and I say, okay, teacher, how am I doing? And I can actually see that, okay, I can tell you really don't love what you're doing. I was told this by a director of training when I worked at this maritime academy. If you don't love what it is you're doing, you're not going to be any good at it. So love, value, right? So we need to see that, right? And then also not only, okay, maybe you want to, but you just can't, psychomotor. You can't articulate those. You can't even imitate, really. So maybe you can replicate it to some extent and imitate it, but you can't really articulate, define things in this particular, let's say, thing that you're doing. So all of those are important to scaffold in here. Maximizing the potential of technology to enhance intercultural competence. So the chapter also touches on the structural implementation and behavioral change hindering the effectiveness of diversity and inclusion programs. So in chapter 10, I'm going to try and wrap it up and see if we can get some comment. In chapter 10, we talk about envisioning the future of intercultural competence and global citizenship. In the final chapter, it synthesizes the lessons from the foundational and advanced frameworks, offering actionable strategies for fostering intercultural competence and global citizenship. It emphasizes the expanding role of technology and virtual education in bridging cultural divides and democratizing access to intercultural learning. But again, this will work in the classroom because we're talking about practices. So obviously, if I'm online, there are a few other tools I need to pick up, but the practices is what we're after. Readers are encouraged to embrace continuous learning, leverage digital tools, and engage in community and global initiatives to promote inclusivity and equity. The chapter also addresses ethical considerations, such as ensuring equitable access and valuing linguistic diversity while preparing for future challenges. Ultimately, it serves as a call to action, inspiring readers to lead the flame again, to lead efforts toward a more empathetic, interconnected, and inclusive global society. So this is not just a book to read per se. It's a guide to apply, to live, to lead with. Okay, so what do we got here? Anything in the chat here? Okay, if anyone is live and wants to share any takeaways, a question, or a moment maybe that resonated with them, maybe the dramatic reading, the things in the chapter, feel free to unmute or drop something in the chat. And I'll read it aloud if you don't want to talk.
Dr. Hamilton.
No worries. Yes.
I appreciate how everything you're saying goes beyond just an EFL classroom or just a boardroom, and really is a call to action regardless of where you are in your leadership. And one of the quotes I wrote down, hang on, I have to go find it because I wrote down something that was so important. You said something, stop waiting for belonging to begin and draw it in, or something to that. And I loved that quote. I wrote it down because so often as leaders, we may be looking for our direct reports or our team members to create belonging with each other. And while we want that to come from our team, we also need to model that in actions as leaders. So I love how this topic is not only for the classroom or only for the boardroom, but really reaches beyond teams, regardless of where they are.
Thank you for that. Anything else? Anything else? See, the chapters, as you know, this kind of comes from the dissertation, but I tried to put it into a woman or man readable format in the book format. I hope I've achieved that. And I guess maybe you could tell about that.
My copy arrives today. I cannot wait to read it.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, great. Thanks for the support. I see there's a Dr. Miller out there. Anything on your side? Anybody else want to unmute? Anybody else wants to unmute? We still have a couple of minutes here, I did have to expand on this chapter one. I said I did have something to expand on for chapter one when I was speaking to talking about global lingua franca and English. So English as a gateway to interdisciplinary learning, right? So English is often the medium through which students access knowledge in various disciplines such as science, history, mathematics, and social studies. For example, in many non-native English-speaking countries, right, English is the language of instruction for higher education and specialized fields, right? This positions English as a potential bridge to global knowledge, right? Enabling learners to engage with diverse perspectives and research from around the world. However, the book cautions that this reliance on English should not overshadow the importance of integrating intercultural competence into these subjects. For instance, teaching history through English provides an opportunity to explore global narratives, but it requires educators to move beyond Eurocentric perspectives and include diverse cultural contributions. So, like I was saying before, no one's asking people to revamp a whole curriculum, but people who do instructional designing and create content, right? I guess it all starts with what are the objectives, right? And so that's what I was saying for Bloom's taxonomy in the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains and scaffold. I think if you don't at least get to level 3 in each of the categories, so if I have a 9 topic, at the end of these 9 topics, you will be able to. So in topics 1 and 2, okay, maybe I'm only talking about remembering and understanding. But by the time I get to the 9th topic at the end, the terminal objective of topic, I need to be at least at level 3, right? Apply, demonstrate. So when you take a course and you're reading the learning objectives, if the learning objectives say understand, describe, list, you are not at level 3. You're at level 2 or below. And I'm not saying we can't go past level 3, but I'm saying to at least be proficient. I didn't say master. Master implies something more, right? Level 4 or 5. And not all the time we can achieve level 5, like creating content, create. And we have those in each of the other categories for the effective. In the effective zone, we need to value what it is we're doing. Again, like I said, if you don't love what it is you're doing, you're probably not going to be any good at it. So learn behaviors through English as a medium. The book discusses how English shapes learned behaviors, particularly in the context of intercultural interactions. As students learn subjects through English, they also acquire cultural norms, communication styles, and problem-solving approaches embedded in the language. For example, collaborative projects conducted in English often teach students teamwork, critical thinking, and adaptability, skills that are essential for navigating multicultural environments. However, the book stresses the importance of ensuring that these learned behaviors are inclusive and culturally sensitive. Educators are encouraged to use English as a medium to introduce students to diverse cultural practices, fostering empathy and global citizenship alongside academic knowledge. So we also need to expand beyond the English, right? It's just a gateway. So English is a powerful gateway. And the book also advocates beyond just global citizenship to something called plurilingual and pluricultural approaches to education, right? Suggesting English should be used as a starting point to explore other languages and cultures, enriching students' understanding of the world. Again, as I said, the objective is to obtain a more complex cultural worldview. You take an assessment and you end up in one particular, let's say the IDI, and 60%, 62% of the people are in this middle zone of intercultural competence. and we need to move towards more complex cultural worldviews. So moving beyond, right? Similarly, teaching social studies in English to incorporate global perspectives on governance, human rights, and sustainability. So in summary, English is not just a language, it's a medium that shapes how students learn, think, and interact in the world. And by leveraging it as a gateway to interdisciplinary learning and intercultural competence, educators can prepare students to thrive in a diverse and interconnected world. Okay, so you taught ESL, and it was one of his favorite experiences. Okay, uh, the culture of musicals to teach English. Oh, maybe you can expound on that more if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. It came down to how language specifically is used in everyday context, the rhetorical exchanges we have for, I can go to France and buy something because I understand the rhetorical exchange of buying something. So in the United States, we know the rhetorical exchanges for, hi, how are you? We really don't want to have a conversation. We just continue moving on, right? Whereas in
Okay. Okay.
musicals, the rhetoric is very purposeful and intentional to tell a story in a very short period of time. So it was really interesting to explore with the students how the rhetoric of those musicals do not match the rhetoric of every day, and do a little compare contrast about all of that. It was just a really interesting way to introduce a different perspective of culture to the students who they were higher education students learning English.
Ah, interesting. I did hear about a lady who used English. I'm sorry, who used music and art for things like that. Very fascinating. Anyway, we're coming up on time, and I obviously want to respect people's time. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I kind of enjoyed it. Like again, if you don't love what it is you're doing, you're not gonna be any good at it. So I thank everyone for coming. And again, I would just say you can wear your why, the flame, right? You outwardly be visible, and there are lots of ways to do it. And I appreciate you, and thank you very much for coming. And if there's nothing else, I'm done here. And if you'd like to stay and chat, fine. If not, thank you very much for coming. And we're about done here. Thank you.
Dr. Hamilton, thank you so much for sharing this information. It's been an honor to see that you have published this book. It's exciting. I can't wait to read it. And just thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for coming, and also Dr. Miller and others who may be listening. Thank you very much, and I hope to have more types of these types of things. So thank you. Thanks for coming. Bye.